What do you think, Chris?
Here's the thing that I find very fascinating about this book. So, this came out in the middle of my time as a retailer. You guys know me. I'm a big Superman fan.
Really?
People who don't know me, I'm a big Superman fan. And the thing that was really, really fascinating about just the fact that they were doing this again, like there's always going to be this general attitude of like, are we doing this again? Particularly among like more seasoned fans, I think. But this was really needed in the continuity at the time that
Mm.
it came out because after Infinite Crisis, uh, Superman stories that had trickled in through the monthlies, including stories that were written by Johns, started to kind of dovetail with details of the origin story, and they weren't matching up with what we had seen in either Man of Steel or in Birthright. So that left all sorts of questions for people to try to kind of figure out for pretty a solid like 2 or 3 years. Like, well, wait a second, is it Birthright or is it Man of Steel? Like, Man of Steel has been in place as Superman's origin story for the better part of 20 years, a little more. But then Birthright comes along and it's a very vastly different take that includes a few more Silver Age elements, as Mark Waid is wont to do. But there are still a lot of incongruities about like exactly what Superman's origin story really canonically was. And a friend of mine named Neil Bailey, who's a staff writer on the Superman homepage for years and years, and he had really good, solid relationships with people who were working in DC editorial, and he was at conventions all the time and talking to writers. He kind of cornered Kurt Busiek and said, "What's the origin? Is it Birthright or is it Man of Steel?" It wasn't that. Yeah, it was. Neil is a very polite person. But he did ask, like, well, what's going on? Like, what are we supposed to think exactly? Which one is the origin? And
Hmm.
Busiek was the one who told him there is none. There
Hmm.
is, but we don't know what it is yet. It is to be told, and that was really like the first indication, the first inclination that there was a new version of the origin story that was going to be in line with everything that we had seen post Infinite Crisis. So it took a while, but then in 2008, as Johns was in the middle of his, arguably legendary run on Green Lantern, issue number 29 came out called Green Lantern's Secret Origin. And this was a story that effectively supplanted Emerald Dawn as the origin story of Hal Jordan, lines it up a bit more with what Johns was doing in the books at the time, and even tease up elements of Blackest Night. Johns and Ivan Reese. It was a very good story. I really love Green
Yes.
Lantern Secret Origin.
Agreed.
Um, so then it wasn't too. You might notice looking just at this cover of Green Lantern number 29, which was the first issue there, the font of Secret Origin is oddly similar
Hmm.
to what's going on here. So it was basically just like this idea of Johns coming in and saying the Secret Origin name is an inherently DC brand. We are re-exploring the beginnings of these characters in select instances. Geoff Johns and Gary Frank is a team that is now very synonymous with Superman because of their collaborations on Action Comics leading up to New Krypton. This is the team that's going to tell us the new origin of Superman. And the Legion had been recently reintroduced at that point as an important part of Superman's early history, after being kind of swept under the rug during most of the post-crisis era, at least in most cases, because Superboy was done away with. So what is there for him to do with the Legion, really? And there were some indications about the Legion existing, but not like the explicit kinds of Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes stories that we had seen in years past. So John's a noted Legion fan. Gary Frank, a singular artist, comes along and creates a new version of the origin story. Now, in the years since it came out, I do think it gets kind of overlooked, weirdly enough, in favor of either Byrne or Mark Waid. And I think that's kind of a mistake because one of the things that I have always really loved about Johns' ability to tell a story, to say nothing of Gary Frank's beautiful work on the pages, on the pencils themselves, is just like teeing up the core theme of something that needs to be addressed, something that needs to be defined, something that needs to be overcome. And in those early issues of this story, you know, you really get to the sense of a world that's kind of lost its way. And certainly by the time you get to Metropolis, it's a bleak place. It's kind of a hopeless place. People are looking down all the time, and something's got to make them look up, and something's got to make them believe in themselves too, without trying to find someone else to solve all their problems. Like, that's one of the things that I don't think is given quite enough credit with Superman, and it's something that Johns always emphasizes, is that yes, he does what he can do because he can, but there is always going to be far more potential and far more long-standing stability when people can try to make their own way. But when we fall off the wagon a little bit, or if we go off the rails, we have someone there who can put us back on track. And that's what Superman's for. He's not this god. He's not a beacon that's trying to take away from the way that people live their own lives. He's there to help where he can. It's just that he can lift a helicopter over his head, so what he can do is just a lot more than a lot of other people can. And it's that humanistic element of Superman, and that's one of the reasons I love this story as much as I do. Don't ask me to pick a favorite. It's kind of a hard thing to do in terms of the modern origin stories, but this one, certainly the art pushes it to a top tier, in my mind at least. And giving service to those elements that were abandoned in most of the post-crisis era definitely earns brownie points with me. But the overall conception of who Superman is, and what he wants to do and what he can do, that's the thing that I continuously go back to with this. It makes it a lot of fun to read. This might be the most fun one to read in my mind, but there is substance here that is too often overlooked. And if you haven't read it, I'd encourage you to.
Man, that's why we paid him big bucks, because Chris has effing nailed that out of the park, man. Damn. I love you, Chris. That was amazing.